for the most part. That's mental wellness. Mental wellness is not about happiness. So I can't tell you how many times I talk to people, families, parents, who are struggling or have a loved one who's struggling. They say, I just want my child to be happy. Mental wellness is not about happiness. Mental wellness is about being able to adapt to the flows and the dynamic experience of a human life, the ups and downs, to be able to adapt and to be able to function. It's also not defined as the absence of mental illness, meaning a person, an individual can have a mental illness, but still be experiencing mental wellness, meaning that that illness is under control, it's being understood, it's being worked with, and so the person can still thrive and live a life that's meaningful. Mental wellness is the balance between one's emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental self. So I like images. Here's a great image just showing the continuum for mental health. So you see optimal mental health at the top, poor mental health at the bottom. And then we've got serious mental illness, no symptoms of mental illness. And you can kind of see what's in each of those quadrants. So we've got optimal mental health with mental illness, or mental health with mental illness, and then without. So sometimes it's nice to just kind of get a visual to understand how we are understanding. So what's mental illness? These are conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, or behavior and affect their ability to function or relate to others. So if you really stop and think about that, when we're diagnosing, someone comes in and says, oh, I'm feeling depressed, I'm not sleeping well, I'm anxious, I've got some worries. Our questions are, how are you functioning in the world? Are you able to work? Are you able to go to school? Are you able to have friends? Are you doing things? Are you engaged? And based on that continuum, based on those answers and that feedback, that's where we start diagnosing or not. So it's related to distress and or difficulty functioning with family, at work, at school, or socially, or all. Mental disorders, we diagnose using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5-TR, which is text revised. It was just recently revised, a new copy. You're updating it all the time, and I'll give some more information about the DSM. So categories of mental disorders in the DSM include anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders, depressive, neurodevelopmental disorders, schizophrenia, and other psychotic disorders, trauma and stress-related disorders, obsessive compulsive personality disorders, and quite a few more. I did not list them all. And we won't be covering them all because I just want to give just a simple overview. Hopefully we'll get to meet again and do more learning. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of mental disorders. 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness. Nearly 1 in 25 adults in America live with a serious mental illness. So mental disorders, the leading cause of disability, excuse me, in the US and Canada, account for 25% of years of life lost due to disability or early death. The second most debilitating illness, cardiovascular diseases, are in the world of the first. Can affect the ability to work and form relationships, can lead to the use of alcohol and other drugs. Can be disruptive to family systems and beyond. I want to share just a little bit of information. We're not going to go too much into COVID, but as we all know, we just came out of something and we're still kind of experiencing the residuals of COVID-19. I want to share a little bit of information from the mental health profession of what happened, what we're understanding because of COVID. So the physical distancing spotlighted negative effects of social isolation. So we really saw through COVID how social isolation impacts mental health. Isolation and loneliness that resulted were a widespread problem even before the pandemic. So imagine what happened after. Remember, we are social creatures. Whether or not we're introverted or extroverted, we are social beings. So what we had to endure with COVID really impacted all of our mental health. And from the perspective of the professionals, this was really a collective experience where the professionals in the medical, first responders, in psychology, we were all having the same experience. So when I was seeing patients back then, and they were coming in saying, I can't find toilet paper, guess what? I couldn't find toilet paper either. Do you remember that? Not being able to find toilet paper, like at Costco? So that was a big challenge that we were talking about in our field of how do we keep that distance so that I can help you when I'm experiencing the same thing? It was a really big, unique phenomenon that we experienced, and we're still living it. A Pew Research Center survey conducted in 2018 found that 1 in 10 Americans feel lonely or isolated all most of the time. COVID-19, it landed us with traumatic stress-related disorder to COVID-19. We're seeing a lot of that show up. Isolation, loneliness, and loss are significant themes that we continue to see at Discovery Counseling Center and just in general in the field. So I want to talk a little bit about the faces of mental health challenges, what it looks like. Because in order to help, it's really important to understand the impact of trauma, stigma, and the importance of early intervention. It's important to identify the key signs and symptoms of mental health challenges. It's important to understand the causes and the conditions and behaviors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those trauma. I want to talk just a tad because if we can understand these components, it allows us to better understand what we're seeing in front of us, because it's really hard to misunderstand certain behaviors. So trauma is understood as an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and it has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. I think the most important part of that is experienced by. If that is my experience, that could be traumatic to me, even though someone might look and say, I don't think that's traumatic at all. So that's just one key to understand, is to really start having that compassion of how the other is experiencing. Some examples, there's many examples, but child abuse, neglect, dysfunctional family systems, domestic violence, the list goes on. Trauma is often a contributing factor for mental disorders and illness. It's usually in the room when we're sitting with patients, and it shows up in different colors and shapes and sizes. Stigma. That's something that we're tackling right here. Just the fact that we're getting together tonight in person through Zoom to talk about this. We're trying to break the stigma. This involves prejudice, which is negative attitudes, and discrimination, negative behaviors. There's still a great deal of stigma associated with mental health in the United States. As progressed as we are, there's still a lot of work to do. And of course, the stigma leads to increased feelings of shame, reluctance to speak about mental health challenges, and reluctance to seek help. This can lead to further isolation, exclusion from employment, housing, social engagements, relationships. If we do not open a place where people can talk about things in a way that is not shamed, belittled, feared, or put down, it can be a big problem. So increasing knowledge and understanding of the experiences of people with mental disorders helps to reduce and eliminate stigma. I love this image. I want to talk a little bit about culture. Why would we be talking about culture? Culture is a combination of a person's values, norms, expectations, and identity. It can affect their perceptions, the actions they take, and how they interact with others. This is really important because if I'm from a culture where a particular behavior is normal and I'm placed within a culture where that behavior is not normal, we can already start to imagine the friction that that will cause. It impacts how communities and families are organized. And we understand now the diversity in the US has grown for many decades. Our population is going to continue to change and shift. So it's super important for us to build cultural competence, have cultural humility. Because if we don't, it can result in further stigma and the differing beliefs about what health is and how it is discussed and treated may be misunderstood. Culture defines a lot of how symptoms are understood and how they're approached. Symptoms in America are looked at different than they are in other parts of the world. In some parts of the world, the individuals with schizophrenia are highly sought after and respected as having a different consciousness, a different awareness, a different level. They're not as pathologized for it. That's just one example. So culture is important. So how do we begin to address mental health? We believe in the before stage 4, which means we want to catch it before stage 4, kind of like the medical model. When we go and we do preventative tests or early detection tests, we want to catch it as early as possible. We need to start changing the way we think about mental health. Thinking more about prevention, early intervention, because once it has already kicked in, it's much more difficult to unwind. I like thinking about the image. Once the genie is out of the bottle, kind of difficult to get the genie back in the bottle. So we want to do things as early as possible. And in order to do this, we must be informed, which is why we're all here. And again, thank you for taking the time. We want to know the warning signs. And of course, early identification and intervention. I wanted to share this image just briefly about the different stages, just to give you an idea of how we look at it. So stage 1, very mild symptoms and warning signs. There might be the sense that something's just not quite right. Stage 2, symptoms are increasing in frequency, severity. One question that's always at the top of our assessment is, how long has this been going on? How long have you been not able to sleep? How long has your eating shifted? How long have you been drinking more? And what is the intensity? At this stage, it usually becomes obvious that something is wrong. Symptoms might become stronger. And then we've got stage 3. This is where symptoms worsen and relapse, relapsing and recurring episodes. So things are, oh, it happened again, and then it happened again, and then sooner. So symptoms are starting to become more severe. And then stage 4, symptoms are persistent and severe and have jeopardized one's life. So our goal is to know enough to know stage 1 and to have the courage to own it and to talk about it and to help and to reach out. That's why we're here. Early intervention. This involves recognizing the warning signs and intervening before mental health issues get worse. It's key in preventing symptoms from becoming more serious. It can help reduce the path from mental health challenge to mental illness. And I wanted to share with you some of the issues that we see at Discovery Counseling Center, some of the mental health issues that are in our community and beyond, adjustment issues, anger management, COVID-related issues, divorce, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, suicide. I've noted those because in a minute I will go into those specifically. Those seem to be really big topics that we see often. But family systems, relational conflicts, grief, isolation, and loss is at the root of almost every case that we work with. Identity exploration, LGBTQ plus support, parenting, co-parenting, PTSD, stages of life, trauma, the list goes on. This is in our community right now, and with our children and growing. So just some basic early warning signs of a mental health disorder. This sort of applies to across the board. I am going to go into more specifics for depression, anxiety, and suicide. But just in general, if you experience or see these symptoms, that's kind of a cue to stop, look, and listen. So any changes in eating or sleeping, pulling away from people, I'm sorry, maybe I can cross that out. Oh, there it is. Have your energy changes, having low or no energy, feeling numb or like nothing matters, having unexplained aches and pains. So it's really important to remember that the body holds everything, right? So a lot of mental health challenges show up with physical symptoms, where we say, I have a headache. And when that symptom comes into our office, we don't say, just take an Advil. We say, let's think about what's going on a little deeper, medically and psychologically, emotionally. So feeling helpless, hopeless, smoking, drinking, using drugs more than usual, feeling confused, forgetful, on edge, angry, upset, worried, or scared, yelling or fighting more, experiencing mood swings, persistent thoughts and memories that you just can't get out of your head, hearing voices or believing things that are not true, harming self or others, inability to perform daily tasks like taking care of yourself, going to school, going to work. These are key warning signs that are sort of across the board. And I just want to say, it's quite natural to experience some of these sometimes. It's quite natural as we move through life to be upset. You get upset at work, or you have a misunderstanding at home, or there's a challenge, or you can't sleep. But if it becomes a pattern, then that's when we have to start thinking towards more help. So I want to get in, let's see, I think we're doing okay with time, okay. I want to look specifically at depression, anxiety, and suicide, just briefly. Again, this is just a brief overview tonight. But depression, as we know, causes severe symptoms that affect how one feels and thinks, handles daily activities such as sleeping, eating, or working. Thoughts, self-criticism. So these are symptoms. These are thinking symptoms, thoughts, self-criticism, self-blame, worry, negative outlook, inability to concentrate, being indecisive, confused, hopeless, helpless thinking, thoughts of death or suicide. I mean, I'm looking at that list and I can't help but see how easy it would be to misunderstand someone who has depression if they just can't make a decision, right? And in our quick, come on, what do you want for dinner? Come on, what do you want? You have to know what you want. What do you want to do with your life? You're 18, figure it out. What do you want to do? Where should we go tonight? How easy it can be misunderstood when a loved one is indecisive, or when a loved one is really down on themselves, blaming themselves, worrying, having that negative outlook. How easily it can be judged, and how important it is for us to have that insight of there could be something else going on. So let me hold back my judgment and see if I can learn more. Emotions related to depression, sadness, anxiety. How tricky it can be to diagnose depression from anxiety, from all the other disorders. Because guess what? Depression can look like anxiety, guilt, anger, another one. Imagine a time when you've been really angry, or your loved one has been really angry, or your child or friend. Now that we know that anger, guilt, mood swings, having no emotion, being irritable, those can all be emotional symptoms of depression. How easily they can be misunderstood. Here are some behaviors: crying spells, withdrawal, slowing down physically, just kind of moving slower, neglecting responsibilities, loss of interest in food or activities. Posture can change. Think about the intelligence of the body if we just stop and pay attention, to look at our loved ones, kind of when there's more of a slumping over. Angry, easily distracted, any changes in eating, sleeping, excess, gambling, shopping, drinking, relationships, all of the excesses. And then what does it look like? Showing up tired, lack of energy, weight loss or gain, headaches, irregular menstrual cycle, loss of sexual desire, unexplained aches and pains. So this is just, and so much more. But this is just a very general, easy way to start thinking about, wow, my loved one has been really irritable, and I haven't been tolerating it very well. I wonder if there's something else going on. What causes depression? There's no single cause. We all want an answer because that makes us feel safe and makes the world make sense, but there is no single cause. It often involves an interaction of biological, psychological, and social factors. Examples of what may trigger depression: having chronic conflict, loss of a loved one, loss of a job, a breakup, being a victim of crime, physical illness, medical conditions. One of the first things we ask when we do an intake is, are there any medical conditions? And oftentimes people will say to me, well, what does that have to do? Yeah, I've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, but that doesn't have anything to do with my symptoms. And as a clinician, I know it could have everything to do with your symptoms, because medical issues are directly connected to our mental well-being. Some examples are Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, stroke, hypothyroidism, lupus, substance use, hormonal and physical changes, trauma, or medication side effects. Again, think about how this information can help us. We start seeing that our loved one or someone we know, behaviors changing. Have you started a new medication? I wonder if there's a side effect happening. So again, how important and valuable and powerful the information can be. So how can you help? How can we help? Well, we want to approach the person and assess for any risk of suicide or harm. How do we do this? As you're talking to the person, you can listen and watch for suicidal thoughts, behaviors, or non-suicidal self-injury. So non-suicidal self-injury are behaviors that don't have the intent to end life, but they're self-harming. So oftentimes we'll see teens that are cutting or doing other self-harm behaviors. Those can all be cries for help. If the person is in crisis, meaning actively having active suicidal ideation, intention, plan, thinking of hurting themselves, we call 911 and we don't leave that person alone. We want to encourage the individual to talk about their feelings, symptoms, and what is going on in their mind. We want to listen non-judgmentally. Now imagine how difficult this is if you're talking to a loved one. That's why when I started the presentation, a lot of this really begins with our own ability to have tolerance for our own human suffering and what it takes to endure this life. If I cannot tolerate my own ways of being, how can I tolerate my child's? How can I tolerate their anxiety, their depression, whatever's going on for them? So it's important to listen non-judgmentally and then to give support and information. Once they feel they've been heard, it's easier to offer support. And we can tune this in just listening, thinking about ourselves. Once we feel that we're heard and understood, something opens, right? So if I go home and I say, oh, I'm really angry, and my family members say, well, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be angry. Don't be angry. That tends not to be helpful. In fact, it might make matters worse. Because of course, maybe I shouldn't be, but I am. So now what do we do? So encourage appropriate professional help. So you now, and I have a sense that you had this information, maybe for many of you, this is a reminder. Now that you know what to listen for, you have an idea of, oh, wow, that's been going on for a long time. It feels pretty intense. It's impacting your work. It's impacting school. It's impacting relationships. It's time to seek professional help. It's important for the individual to make the call. This is something really important. We tend to be compassionate, empathetic beings. We want to help each other. And oftentimes out of that love and goodness, we say, here, I'll make the call for you. It's really important for us all to understand that the person needs to make the call. That's part of their healing. That's part of their understanding. Imagine what the subtle implication is. If I'm making the call for you, I'm essentially telling you that you can't make the call yourself. You need me to make the call. And that doesn't always empower that person. Now, can you be there with them when they make the call? Can you give them the phone number? Absolutely. But allow them the empowerment of making that call. What not to do. Do not tell someone to snap out of it or get over it. And be mindful, if that's your first response, that's time for you, for us to take a minute. That's time for us to take a minute. Wow, I'm irritable. I can't tolerate this person. I'm telling them to snap out of it. Maybe I need to take a moment for myself. Do not adopt an over-involved, overprotected attitude towards someone who's depressed. This is all pertaining to someone who's depressed, by the way. I guess we could take it across the board, but over-involved, overprotected attitude towards someone who is depressed starts to validate that that's their state from here on out, and that they can't really get out. I'm going to take care of you. You can't do this on your own. So it's very important to be non-judgmental, listen, pay attention, show you're caring, and help empower them. Do not use patronizing tone of voice or facial expression that shows extreme look or concern. That may create a larger ripple effect of, wait a second, I thought I was bad, but you think I'm bad? You think I'm not okay too? I must really be bad. I must really be in a bad place. But that's kind of an inclination when we care for someone. Like, oh gosh, yeah, that's really bad. So just be mindful the way you're approaching the person who's depressed. We don't want to ignore. We don't want to disagree with. We don't want to dismiss the feelings. by attempting to say something positive like, well, you don't seem that bad. You seem okay to me. This is something that tends not to be helpful to someone who's experiencing depression. Just one more last thing about that. If the person is experiencing clinical depression, meaning it's diagnosable, it's creating extreme distress, there's very little that that person can actually hear. You know, we're speaking to them maybe in the logical voice, oh, you should get up and, you know, you should go jogging and then eat better and you're not sleeping, so you should sleep. And genuinely being in that state, all that person hears is wah, 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 wah. Judge, judge, judge. You're bad. Shame, shame, shame. You're never getting out of this. That's what they hear. So if you're hearing yourself give those recommendations, that's a time for you to stop, look, and listen. I can't tolerate their depression. I need to step back. I'm not helping. Really important. Just that one little shift can make a big difference for someone. Okay, anxiety. Anxiety disorders differ from developmentally normative fear or anxiety. You know, anxiety is very natural. Having fear and worry is natural. It's part of our life. But when it becomes excessive or persists beyond developmentally appropriate periods, and there's a high level of distress and fear, avoidance of feared situations, that's when we go towards diagnosing anxiety. What do the thoughts look like? Mind racing, mind going blank, decreased concentration, decreased memory. I'm indecisive, I'm confused, I'm having vivid dreams. Isn't that an interesting one? What do emotions look like? Excessive fear, worry about the past, about the future, irritability, impatience, anger, feeling on edge, nervous, a sense of danger, panic, doom. What do the behaviors look like? They're avoiding. There might be some obsessive compulsive behaviors. There might be distress in social situations, sleep disturbance, increased substance use, or maybe engaged in repeated rituals to sort of ease that anxiety. And appearance, the person may look restless, inability to relax, increased heart rate, shortness of breath, sweating, dizziness, numbness, trembling, shaking, gastrointestinal problems, muscle aches. So you can see how so many of these symptoms could look like lots of other things as well. It could look like a panic attack usually feels like a heart attack. That's why people end up in the emergency room. I'm having a heart attack. Turns out it's a panic attack. So again, the more you know, the more we talk about it, the more we can understand the symptoms, help our loved ones, and help ourselves, help other community. What causes anxiety? Again, no single cause. Again, involves interaction of biological, psychological, social factors, trauma and abuse. It's connected with changes in the brain, different neurotransmitters, different chemical interactions. How do we help someone with anxiety? Again, we want to approach the person. We want to assess for risk of harm. You want to talk, listen, watch for signs of crisis. For anxiety, the crisis looks like extreme levels of anxiety and panic, severe anxiety following a traumatic event, suicidal thoughts, behaviors, or non-suicidal self-injury. Again, we listen non-judgmentally. Again, we give support and information. Again, we encourage appropriate professional help. Suicide. Suicidal ideation, this term refers to thinking about, considering, and planning suicide. Suicidal ideation is very different from the natural thinking about ending life. There's a difference. Being human, trying to accept our mortality, understanding what happens, it's natural for people to think about those things. But suicidal ideation, when we use that term, that means that the person is thinking about doing this, planning it, intention. Asking about suicide does not increase the risk. It's a hard topic. It's a hard question to ask. And there is a myth around, oh gosh, if I say it, maybe they'll start wanting to do it. That's not true. Many research studies have shown that that's simply not true. So this is where it takes courage for us to talk about these things. What do the thoughts look like of someone who has suicidal ideation? There could be thoughts of revenge, belief that there's no way out, no reason for living, or sense of purpose. What are the emotions? Dramatic change in mood, hopelessness, rage, anger, anxiety, agitation. Behaviors, threatening to hurt or kill oneself, looking for ways to hurt or kill oneself, talking, writing about death, dying, or suicide, seeking revenge, giving away possessions, recklessness, increased substance use. And appearance. There could be agitation, increases, decreases in sleep, all kinds of different changes, increases, decreases in eating habits, social habits, just ways of being. So how would we help someone who seems like they might be experiencing suicidal ideation? First of all, if someone tells you that they feel suicidal, we take that seriously. We take that seriously. We take that as a cry for help. If I'm in a state so strong that I'm telling you I'm in a state, I'm in a state. If we find ourselves not able to hear that, again, that's us, and it's time to step back and reassess. So we ask the person directly about suicide. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? These are big questions. These are big questions to ask people that we care about, or even strangers. But sometimes that question can save a person's life. Sometimes that person is alone in a dark trench having these thoughts, and no one has yet had the courage to ask. So just by asking can save a life. Here it is. Be aware of your own attitudes about suicide and the impact of these on your ability to provide help. Understand that the person may not want to talk to you, and offer to help them find someone to talk to. Again, maintain cultural humility and respect around cultural differences about death, dying, suicide, and other matters. And we want to act promptly, share concerns in an open way, and listen non-judgmentally. So regarding suicide, what is supportive? Patience, being calm. Listen without expressing judgment, accepting what they are saying without agreeing, disagreeing their point of view. Asking open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are ones that don't require a yes or a no. So trying to engage in dialogue. Show that you're listening by summarizing what the person is saying. So what I'm hearing is that you're feeling that you're alone in the world. Clarifying important points with the person to make sure that they are fully understood. So let me get this straight. The way I was talking to you the other day made you feel like I didn't care. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Expressing empathy for the person. Expressing empathy for the person. That requires a little pause. What is not supportive? This is based on research and all of our work in the field. We do not want to agree or debate. If someone is telling you that they're having suicidal ideation, this is not a debate. There's nothing to agree or disagree. They're expressing their experience. We do not discuss whether suicide is right or wrong. Remember, if someone is in that state, They can't hear us the way that we're hearing each other in this moment. They just can't. There has to be compassion around that. Do not use guilt or threats. This makes it worse, really worse. For example, you know, if you commit suicide, people that commit suicide go to hell. Or, how would you ever do that? That will ruin me. Think about what that would do to your father. That makes it so much worse. This person is already suffering. So we don't want to say anything like that. We don't want to minimize problems. We don't want to say things like, oh, don't worry, cheer up. You have everything going for you. Everything will be okay. Again, these are efforts to ease our anxiety with the bigness of sitting with someone who's thinking about such a big thing. So if you're finding yourself saying these things, again, time to step back and take a moment. We don't want to interrupt with our own stories. Oh yeah, when I was 18, oh, I went through a bout. They can't hear it. They just can't hear it. And we don't want to call their bluff. Oh yeah, well go ahead then. I'm tired of hearing you. You keep saying you're going to kill yourself. Just go ahead and do it then. Be done with it already. This has happened, which is natural, right? Like it's so difficult to be in that place with someone, but we don't want to do that because when someone's in that state, it can really push them over the edge. And we don't want to diagnose, not in that moment. Hey, I think you've got what I see as borderline personality disorder. They can't hear that. And it's disrespectful to do that to someone in that moment. So those are some ideas of what's not supported. Types of help, medical treatments. This is not just for suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression. This is across the board. Medical treatments, psychological treatments, that's where we come into play, or other support, people, programs, activities, communities that help people cope with stressors. So a little bit about us, Discovery Counseling Center. We're a nonprofit community-based mental health agency. We've been serving the San Ramon Valley for over 50 years. Our mission is to be the community's leader in mental wellness. We really believe in prevention and early intervention. We provide affordable, high-quality, culturally appropriate and accessible counseling and programs, all ages. We also are a training agency. So we offer robust, high-regarded training for future clinicians in the field. We partner with the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. We have an intern in every school in the district, K through 12. And we also have interns working in our clinic. We're really aimed to create greater awareness of the prevalence of mental health issues in our community and beyond, and the importance of early treatment. We offer group psychotherapy, individual therapy, couples, families, all kinds of different treatments. This is our team. I always think it's important to put faces to the work being done. We have over 50 people working in our agency, making really great change in the community and beyond. All right, we just have a couple more slides. Maintaining mental wellness. This is not a quick fix. Therapy is not a quick fix. It takes a moment, it takes patience, it takes dedication, it takes a desire and willingness to shift. And mental wellness is a skill that may be more challenging for some than others. We believe that each person's journey toward mental health wellness will be different, depending on their needs, their lifestyle, and their personal goals. I want to bring us back to that quote, mental wellness. Something to think about when we go home tonight. Something to assess in ourselves, to think about with each other in this room, in our homes, at work. It's a state of well-being in which we can realize our abilities and we can cope with the stressors of life, we can work productively and fruitfully, we're able to make a contribution to our community. I think that's a pretty good definition of what we're working towards. Thank you so much for listening so intently. I'd love to answer any questions, reflections.
Can you please join me in thanking Dr. Dimitrakos? Questions, please write them down on a card. There's a card on every seat, and there are pens in every row.
And I want to say I am respectful of your time. I'm happy to stay as long as we have to. Oh, yes. So here's a great story. Here's a great story. 50 years ago, there was a therapist who decided to help the teens in the district. And he would kind of stand on a corner. I'm getting to you. You're the most important part here. No, really, stand on a corner and help the teenagers. And there were a group of moms who were like, oh, we're going to do some garage sales. And we're going to help you get an office. And eventually he got an office. And of course, now that's Discovery Counseling Center. But that garage sale idea turned into a thrift station in Danville. And that thrift station is really one of the biggest reasons why we are in business. And we've over 100 volunteers keeping the thrift station going in Danville. And the proceeds, a huge amount of the proceeds, come to Discovery Counseling Center. And we're so grateful for the volunteers and the work. If you haven't been to the thrift station, please go. We've got a couple volunteers with us today.
And they're celebrating our 50th anniversary.
Yes. 50th year anniversary, so supporting us. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you.
And we're gonna have a big party on June.
Uh-oh, party. Big party, June 3rd. Is everyone invited? Uh-oh. Yeah.
And it's not a fundraiser.
Not a fundraiser.
And Dan actually is going to perform
Nice. So big party to celebrate. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, okay, here's a great question. How does someone who lives with a person, this is such a great question. How does someone who lives with a person who has mental illness determine what is the best way to interact with them? What to do, what not to do? How to help slides on different, yes. Yeah, so I think thank you for that question, very important question. I think this is one of the biggest challenges when one of our loved ones are experiencing these things. Just general guidelines, what we went over, being able to listen, being able to know the signs. This might sound counterintuitive, but taking care of yourself first, because if we are not okay, if we're not taking care of ourselves, what happens? We're not thinking straight, we can't make decisions, and our tolerance level goes down. So it sounds counterintuitive because we want to help the other, but we can't help the other if we're not okay. So I would say number one, start there. The best way to interact with them openly. You may have to create boundaries depending on what's going on. Educating yourselves. You may have to be the one to seek professional help. Again, completely counterintuitive, I understand, because we have so many people call in and say, I need help for my loved one. Loved one does not want to come for help, cannot come for help. And I say, I would recommend you coming. It's not for me, I'm fine. Yes and no. What can we do to help you cope and find the resources to know the answers? So those are my just general, what I would recommend just from the get-go question. And I hope that helps a little bit. Of course, I just apologize from the get-go. We are, we're limited. This is a short time. I hope we can do this again and open it up even more. Another question. Is there a navigation center that can help direct people in need to find the best place for them, or the best services? Yes, we are one of them. We're definitely one of those navigation centers where you can call us and say, oh, I've got this issue, where do I go? As the clinical director, I do all the intakes. I'm taking calls all the time. I'm happy to share my email with you and contact information. And there are other places in the community as well that I can give that information. NAMI is one of them. Maybe I can send our list of resources over to the office that can be shared for everyone. Question is, who does what? What clinician does one see? Okay, what clinician does one see for which mental health issues? Okay, what are the different clinician roles? Where's the front door? Where to start? Okay, who does what? What clinicians does one see for which mental health issues? Okay, so yeah, different clinicians across the board. So we've got licensed marriage family therapists. We also have licensed psychologists. Licensed psychologists, we can assess, we can do evaluations, we can do testing. I think that any mental health professional that you go to, depending on the issue, very, very severe. If it's an issue that needs medication, that's a psychiatrist. Licensed marriage family therapist, licensed psychologist, one-on-one therapy, and couples work and family work. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question right. Where's the front door, where to start? Well, again, you can start with reaching out to an agency like us. You can call us and say, here's my situation, share a little bit more about what's going on, and we can lead you to the next place. So I would say that, and I want to say this is the front door. We're at the front door. This is it. Because this is us coming together, getting information that we're going to pass on with people around us. And this is where we start. But yes, you can call, you can also do, again, the resources that I'm going to share will be shared out to larger community, different places that you can call. Great question. Where can I get help if I don't have money or insurance? Isn't this an interesting one? Because usually mental health issues come with, we talked about it, can't get a job, can't sustain a job, having trouble, and yet we call to get help and the fee is through the roof, causing more stress. So this is not me selling Discovery Counseling Center, but genuinely, we are one place that you can go to for help. And there are other places in the community that also serve and have sliding scale. We do have a sliding scale to see our therapists and to get help. So we do serve people that don't have money, don't have insurance. And the resource list that I'll share will also have other resources of where to go to get help. That's a really big question. And I think the other piece that I'm thinking about is we're at the point now where people in the community, all of us need this information so that we can start being, first responders to help at that first level. So I'm just so happy that you're here. If you could say anything to a parent of a young person with depression, what would you say? It's a really good question. I would say, don't give up. I would say, there's hope. I would say, get support for yourself. I would say, it's real, but don't be afraid. I would say don't be afraid to talk about things with them. I would say don't put extra pressure on them. First and foremost, I would say put the oxygen mask on yourself. You know, when you travel on an airplane, it is counterintuitive. They say if the oxygen mask falls down, put it on yourself first before helping your friends or loved ones. I remember being at the first time I traveled, seeing that, thinking, there's no way I would put it on myself first. I'm helping my loved ones, but guess what? If I'm passed out, I'm no good. So that would probably be the first thing I would say. Get that oxygen mask on. Such a good question. Because so many people suffered from isolation and depression during COVID, is the state now shining a spotlight and more funds on this issue? I sure hope so. I think so. That might be a question for someone else on the team. I can only share what I know from this perspective, from our work. I think so. I think there's spotlights are getting brighter and brighter. I mean, look at, we're all here having the conversation, so. Thank you. Yes, oh yes, thank you. I do want to reinforce the use of the crisis hotline 988. Thank you for that. Anyone experiencing suicidal ideation, I did say earlier 911, and I want to say 988. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. So much to think about. Yeah, so much to remember. Another question, what is the appropriate role of drugs in therapy? Are we talking about prescription medication for, yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. What is the appropriate role? I'll tell you the most famous answer in psychology. It depends. And I apologize with all my heart, but genuinely, it depends. There are some people that just need, and I don't want to say just, but really benefit from sitting with someone who's listening, who's paying attention, who knows how to guide them, who knows how to give them what they need. And things can get better. And then I have also seen miracles happen with psychopharmacology. And I tend to be on the very conservative side. So as a clinical psychologist, we do not prescribe medication. We work with psychiatrists who would prescribe. I personally tend to be on the very conservative side. I've also seen the blessings and gifts of finding the right medication for someone who's really suffering. So the appropriate role of drugs in therapy is finding the appropriate doctors who understand exactly what's going on and can guide and make really courageous decisions about doing things smart. And again, I apologize if that's not the answer that you're hoping to hear, but that's really where we're at. Other thoughts or questions? Oh, I didn't.
It's hard to connect with the Discovery House.
I'm sorry.
Is there a connection between your counseling service and the Discovery House?
No, there's no connection. And thank you for asking. You know, this word discovery is a powerful word. And so it makes sense why it is the name of many different organizations and agencies in our area as well. But we're a Discovery Counseling Center in the San Ramon Valley. And no. Thank you.
You accept Medi-Cal?
We do have, we don't currently have any openings for Medi-Cal, that we do have 2 providers. in our facility, but just currently no openings. But we're hoping to expand. Thank you for that. We actually, the way that we work, we actually do not carry a waiting list. So far, we have been able to help people as they call in. And if we cannot help them because we don't want to have people waiting, you know, on a waiting list, what we do is we refer out. We take that list that I'm going to share and we start giving resources and really helping the person find the right services. That's why we don't carry a waiting list. Thank you.
So much. Thank you. If you would like more information, we have information from the Counseling Center at the front desk.
I don't have a card with me, but I am at extension 310. So, and just our number. And if you call our number and ask for me, you know, or you can just say, who's the woman that did the presentation? They'll know. Who's the Greek woman? They'll know. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.